Welcome back to another episode of How I Made My First Comic Book. In this episode, we're going to dive into how I lettered the first issue of Ice Pick. The last episode, I ended up showing you all of the ways I color, different techniques, and all the brushes I use, and I will link to that video in the description below. But today, we're going to tackle lettering. And as simple as it may sound, there is some technical aspects to it. I'm kind of a quick and dirty letterer. I just end up trying to get in there and do the best I can to get the story across, to get the words in there. Programs I use are Illustrator, and I will dive into, I've switched over to Clip Studio Paint, which is a one-time purchase program as opposed to a subscription. I know there's a lot of different opinions on what softwares to use for creating things. Like I've mentioned before, there is a vast variety of softwares. I'm kind of in the process of switching away from Adobe into more one-time purchase type of software, things that are a little bit more optimized for my Mac and all that good stuff. So without further ado, let's get into lettering in Illustrator. So this is going to be Illustrator. This is just page one, just like we had before when I talked about the script and I talked about getting the inks laid down and then getting the colors put together. And then I save that out as a high res. Typically I save around 400 DPI. I crop it to whatever the printer I'm using requires. Most printers will have a template to say this is the inches that we need or a pixel dimension. It can vary. Again, there's no, one answer, one shoe fits all type of thing for making comics. As long as your stuff is up to the proper resolution. I'd say for me, working years in the print production industry and design industry, I have found that, it doesn't matter the style of art that you use as long as it is up to the quality of resolution. If you start small, you can never upscale to AI now, which I'm not a huge fan of, but there is upscaling stuff, software that does do a decent job. But if you start at the right resolution, you never have to worry about that. So for me, I will save out at around 400 DPI. Now we zoom in on page one. I have the script. I've kind of read over it. And for me, it's pretty simple. It is very much a copy and paste type of situation for lettering. I end up, taking page one, panel one, and it's like, granted, it's more of a splash page. There are some panels on top of the larger cityscape, but I say, hey, here's panel one. Here's the first word balloon, and it's more of a thought balloon. And in the script, when I talked about that, it was like I use TB to do thought balloons. Word balloons, I don't say anything, but for a thought balloon, I will do that. So I can create shapes here in Illustrator. I can make them whatever I want. You can see here, this is the color, this is the border, and some of them are more complex shapes. You can do this however you want. As you see, there's two different. Let's zoom in a little bit more. We'll get this a little bit cleaner. There we go. There's two different shapes here. They're just one shape on top of the other, and this is primarily for how I wanted to set this up. I mean, it's really dealer's choice, however you want this. But as you can see, there's like this little tiny sliver. And it shows up in the comic. You gotta be real careful when you're doing very small detail things, what shows up and what doesn't. And I thought this was a nice little touch, just a little border that kind of almost bleeds into the black a little bit. You don't have to do this. A lot of letterers will just have a single box with a single color, or what would be called a gradient. So like this fades from white to black to white. You could do, it really is dealer's choice on that. So that being said, I come in here, I copy from my Pages document, and I make a text box, and I literally, I can come in here, make a text box, and I just say, I paste, right? Now, the fonts used and those types of things, again, are a little bit subject to the letterer and what they want to use. I'm using a font called Crime Fighter BB. Came across this years ago, free font, really liked it. It wasn't Comic Sans, which is kind of the cardinal sin when lettering. You never want to use Comic Sans, or at least that's the joke in the industry. But for me, I felt this was a really nice font. It had a little bit of a comic feel to it. It wasn't hard to read at different sizes, things like that. I'm using a 6-point, if you can see up there. So for me, 6-point is a pretty decent lettering size. I didn't want to go larger, smaller. Personally, what I ended up doing is I would, because like a lot of people out there, I had no idea what size a font should be when doing a comic book. So for me, I started out literally like with this page 1, I would print it out 100%, which is like around 6 3/4 by like 10 1/4, somewhere around there. And I would print it out 100% on a regular sheet of paper. And this goes back like 10, 12 years. And I would have different size fonts, like 5, 6, 7, 8, I think is what I ended up doing. And just printed out those fonts 100% on a piece of paper, this page, to see what it looked like. And then I literally went in there and measured a comic book and measured a few different comic books to see, like, were they using different sizes? How does that translate? And I found that 6-point is pretty close. You could go a little bit larger if you want. Some people probably do for readability. I didn't find that this was too small, or that it was, like, to me, like too large. You really don't want your fonts to be, your words to be too large, because it really does take over the artwork. And for me, it was important to have this nice balance, the balance of the artwork, the balance of the words and captions and thought balloons and all these things. Like, even today when I'm doing, I'm working on Luke issue 3 now, I'm lettering that book. I'm using Clip Studio Paint for Luke, and we'll get into that one here in a little bit. But right now it's, I built out the shape that I want, and I copy and paste in my words, right? It's very simple. You just copy and paste, copy and paste. Once you get the font that you like, then you kind of decide on a size of that font that you want to use. In this case, I ended up making this, the word city is bold. And again, that's another choice that you can choose to do. Letterers will sometimes bold certain words. And I did this early on, and I kind of got away from it. And for me, like, the way I write, and this goes to just a personal thing as well, because like making a comic book is extremely personal. It's not just personal on a personal level, like the story is a personal thing, but how I choose to do things within the comic book. And for me, when I try to write as real people talk. I don't add a lot of fluff and a lot of dialogue. If there's storytelling elements, I try to do that during something that's visually interesting to look at. Sometimes there's just a lot of talking heads, but again, sometimes that's, again, reality in life. So for me, I feel like when someone is articulating certain words, or for me, if certain words need to stand out, then that's when I go ahead and add in, I would bold the certain words. So, once I have really one shape built, I mean, it's pretty simple. I built the one shape. I literally would just copy and paste that. I'm a big keyboard shortcut kind of guy. So for me, I do believe I'm on a Mac. So Option and what was it? I think it's Control on a PC. Or is it? Yeah. Anyways, Alt Option. I would use that, and I think that copies and pastes. You can Command C, Command V, or Control C and Control V. I do believe that also is a copy and paste keyboard shortcut. So I would just copy and paste the shapes, because I know that these are all word balloons, right? And you're like, okay, well, cool, we got that down. We got our thought balloons in. We got the the section here that's going to be the dialogue, right? So what about actual word balloons? What about like actual dialogue? Well, let's get into it. So this here is page 5, and typically I've been showcasing pages 1, 2, 3, and page 5 for this video series of how I made my first comic. And as you can see, I do a lot off kind of panel or off page, Illustrator does allow you this flexibility. I will say it's definitely a plus in the Illustrator kind of world, or for Adobe. Not all programs allow kind of off artboard type of work, and like to have stuff off an artboard. So for me, again, like if we zoom in, this up here is still like that page one. So for me also, for workflow, I will make one page, kind of start, I build it out. Like this page here, you can see I have some partial word balloons. They are separate. Once I build a page that has word balloons, or this one, it kind of has sound effects too, because obviously sound effects are a big thing in comics, or they can be. So for me, I would build a page, take the time to build out any of the thought balloons or any of the word balloons, because in Illustrator, like my workflow is I'll get into it here in a second, but I want to take the time to build out those word balloons or have them in pieces. And sometimes on certain pages, I'll have 5 or 6 different sizes of word balloons and all the different pieces, so that it creates a quicker workflow for future pages. So if I take page one, for example, I will just literally copy that file and paste that file 21 more times, because I have 22 pages in my comic book. And or I will do page one. If I know the rest of the book doesn't really have a lot of word balloons, then maybe I don't copy that file. But maybe I end up going into page one and making just a couple word balloons, and then I have that one kind of, I would say, master file, which would be page one, and then I can just copy that file and replace all the stuff within it that I need to. One thing with Illustrator I will touch on here is up here in the right hand corner, we see 2 different files. These are links, and these are the 2 templates. These are the 2 pages that are linked within this page. I have and we'll just quickly show you this. This is my comic book template from my printer. So they say, this is the size, 6.6, 10 and a quarter. So that's the size at 300, 400 DPI. It doesn't much matter. This is a relatively older template. They may have higher DPI requirements today. I didn't really touch on CMYK or RGB mode. I may get into the production side of things. Years ago, it mattered. In my experience, I would say that it matters less. And I'll throw in some examples in the production video. Try to remember to do that to show why it matters less. And if you're handling the pre-production, or you're a colorist and you're handing this off to a letterist, it's important to pay attention to one of the things that I'm going to touch on in the next video. And I would say there's certain colors that are absolutely a nightmare to deal with. Purple and greens are one of them. If you get them too hot, too bright, too vivid, just too much, you're going to see a huge color shift if you go from CMYK to RGB. And I will show some examples of that. I think it's important for everyone to know, but for me, I set up, here's my safe guide for working. Here's my letters, and then here's the artwork. Once I get everything kind of set up, this is what it's just showing you, that this is the link. This is all the information about that file. Illustrator does a pretty good job of doing all this, but they just raised their prices. So I'm not going to go in and continue to pay, over $800 a year for Illustrator in the Adobe suite, when there's much better options out there. Or I just have to learn the software. I don't know if they're much better, but there are definitely more options out there than ever before. So, that's kind of why I'm making that switch. So let's get back into this lettering here. So now we got the page, we got everything set up, we got everything imported. We swapped out, let's say we swapped out page 1 to page 5, right? So we're working this. You basically make an Illustrator. You have a tool that allows you to kind of make a square. I make ovals. These can be all different kinds of shapes. You can copy and paste these, right? And once you paste a shape, obviously you can make it anything you want, any size you want. Illustrator has handles, so you can really distort it if you need to, whatever you need to do. I mean, I don't really do that too much. I will say for certain word balloons that have more dialogue, I will add, I will make them a little bit, it's kind of hard to tell with this page, but sometimes with a page you have a lot of dialogue. So you'll kind of see a word balloon a little bit more like this, that's a little bit more square, versus something that's definitely more rectangle. You know, you can see a word balloon that's kind of like maybe even in between, you know, and it really just depends. It really depends, how you want to build, how much copy, how much text you have, and how does that fit um, within your word balloon. So we're just going to do this. We're going to take this word balloon and bring that to the foreground. And that's one thing, a quick little note here is when you're working in Illustrator, I have one layer. A lot of softwares support layers, and I keep all my copy and word balloons on one layer. I mean, you may want to have your word balloons on one layer and your copy on another layer. And within Illustrator specifically, what it does is you can, if you're not seeing your words or your copy, there's an option to bring the copy to the front, and that's what you're going to want to do. So we're here and we have, you know, not a whole lot of words, but let's just say, you know, this continues with something else and we got quite a bit in here. So we're just throwing in some junk. For me, I would say personally, I try to do what would be almost like two pyramids, kind of biggest sides put together. So I have a square. I want my text to look kind of like that. Okay. I want the smallest part up here and the words expand as I get through. And then I also want it to get smaller as it comes down. Keeping that shape in mind, it looks like it's kind of a square. Okay, obviously it was a square, but it looks like it would be your word balloons would all be squares. But in reality, if we bring that to the foreground, in reality, your word balloons kind of end up looking a little square, but they also can be more oval. So it really depends on how, you know, and if I had to fit all of that whole box in there, it would be way bigger, right? And you really could do that if you wanted to. I feel that's a little bit more intrusive depending on the artwork. Lettering is such a subjective thing in my opinion, where I mentioned it earlier, it is a huge balance between not covering artwork, not covering people's faces or important things that are happening. You never want to put a piece of like a word balloon. Let me just see what's going on. Like, you never want to put like if this guy up here, this guy's talking first. Okay, so if he's talking first, you never want to do something like this. You know, if he's got a lot of words, you know, you want something up here that probably is going to fit a little bit more like that. Okay, so depending on the artwork, it could be oval, it could not be. I tend to really try to stick with oval. Back to the example here, if we're dealing with this, how I would letter this, okay, and there could be more copy. That's, to be honest, I think that's probably about my average copy per word letter count per word balloon. I'm sure there's a science to it on what's an optimal amount, but this is what I would do with this word balloon here. I'd come in here and you start to figure out how much you need. Now, if this is one word or two words, let's say it's that, okay, and we get another period, get another word in here, depending on the words, okay, it's gonna look something like that. All right, so this is that shape, okay? This is that shape that is just smaller, right? It's just a smaller shape. It has the shorter part starts, it gets a little bit longer. You know, this is what I'm looking at. This, the edging of all the copy. And, you know, the important thing is to keep your copy centered. You can go left justified or right justified. I think in Luke, some of the other word balloons, or I would say the dialogue, if there's like a voiceover, that's another word. Like I would use VO for voiceover when I'm scripting. I think I write justified some of those. You can center justified. I'm not sure if there's an actual standard on that, but the important thing is, and there's a lot of professionals out there that give advice and talk about lettering. It's also really important. One thing I've kind of picked up over the years is when you're using the letter I. So if it's a single I, you'd want to do the cross on the I. Okay. If it's the word like is, you don't. You want that to be a single line. So all the single letter I's, that's how you want to letter them. At least that's what I've learned over the years, and I try to do what professionals do. So now once we have our word balloon, we're like, hey, that looks kind of good. We really come in here and resize this. And I'm just using a keyboard shortcut on a Mac here. Option Shift allows me to size it proportionately together if I like how it's looking, right? Typically what I also do is, this is just, again, it's a little workflow for me, is I will touch the word balloon to all of the edges of my words. And what this does in Illustrator, this is something that once I get into Clip Studio here in a little bit, Illustrator does this, Clip Studio does it, kind of handles things a little bit differently. So if I'm doing this, and if I'm doing Option Shift or Alt Shift, I can size this equally proportionately all at once. I just bring this out just a little bit. Okay, I don't need a lot, right? I've seen some letterers that have like a ton of white space. Again, that takes up too much. For me, I think it takes up too much of the art. I need enough to separate this word balloon from the artwork. And with a white background, I get that. I don't have to worry about any of that. I know in some of the other ice pick pages and some of the other ice pick comics, I ended up changing that color to let's say a blue. I think I did a blue, and then I just would change this font to a white, and I do that so that it's visible, right? And I leave everything else like that. So that's, I've done that in other stories. Annabelle, I did that quite a bit. People recognize color before anything else. So for me, like in Annabelle specifically, I know I did that quite a bit. Like her parents had different color word balloons. Kerr had a different, the bad guy had a different color word balloon. And it's just, adding a little bit of flair, adding something a little bit visually interesting. So we're going to take this here. We're going to take this word balloon. We have 3 separate pieces here, and we're going to slide this as if, my man Ice Pick is going to say something really cool, right? He's like, yeah, screw you, door. I'm taking you down, right? Because, next panel, you see a footprint and he kicks a door in. He's like, nah. So we have the tail, and this is, pretty basic. I come in here with the pen tool. I click and drag. I start it out. I click and drag again to start the next one. Click and drag, and we kind of finish up that tail, right? It's not perfect, but that's a tail. Now, there are definitely guidelines to creating tails. This is not a really nice looking tail compared to the other one, because I've spent the time to kind of modify that a little bit. So if I click the direct selection tool, I can change these handles. And you want a nice curve. You want this to be a nice curve, okay? You don't want sharp edges. This is something you just want it nice and smooth. So that's a little bit better tail than, the other one, or than what it looked like before. But we have this tail here. So what am I gonna do? If this is all the copy that Ice Pick is saying, where's the best place to put this? Well, he's looking at a door, okay? That's his body. We could do that. We could put it up here maybe. The other thing is we really don't want to cross panels. I feel like that's something that I do intentionally. I've done that in Annabelle when she was speaking. I would purposely put her panels, some of her word balloons, I would allow her to be the one to break that panel. I don't like doing it, and it's kind of like a last resort. I just don't. So Also, the one thing I just noticed, I didn't touch on this too much, but with these word balloons, I'm using a fill of white in my stroke. And I get into my stroke here. The stroke is about 1 point. I can go bigger if I wanted to. I can go less. I felt 1 point was, again, not too big, not too small. You just want it to stand off the page. So back to placement. We're kind of struggling maybe with this placement. If I had this much copy, I would do literally one of two things. I would decide, can I cut out any other copy? Is it important? Is it important to the story? Is it important to character development? Pretty much that's it. If it's important to the story, whereas if two people are talking and they're revealing something important, I try to think, okay, can I say this in less words? And that's the struggle as a writer. Since I'm writing this book myself, I'm not sending this off to a letterer. If because I'm the writer, I can make these edits. If we're working in a normal situation, you have a writer, you have an editor, you have a penciler, an inker. The penciler, as far as the script goes, they're the ones laying everything out. So they have to be, like I talked about in my penciling episode, they have to be the ones to plan everything out, leave space for word balloons, make these dynamic panels and something interesting, even if it's kind of a little bit of a boring story script type of thing. If there's story development, the penciler artist has to make that interesting. Once you get to, colors are done, it's off to the letterer. The letterer and the writer may go back and forth and say, hey, can we tweak this word balloon? Can we tweak this script on page 3, panel 2, or whatever? Because I'm the writer, I can come in here and say, can I cut this down? If I can't, okay, then I'm done. Then I say, okay, this is all important. It's absolutely necessary. I have my little tail. I literally am just using the selection tool in Illustrator. I'm going to reflect it. Once I get it, I just go 90 degrees and it changes it. Yeah, so we go from that to this. And why is that important? Because what we want to do is place this right here by his mouth. Now, there is a rule of thumb. It's more of getting things lined up with your word balloons. And this is, again, just something that I've kind of learned over the years. You want the tail, the point, this point here, you want your point to be going to the person's mouth, right? But you also want the tail, the whole tail, not just the point of the tail, that's got a point, but you want the whole tail to sit not in the center of a word balloon. And that's very important. It's just something that professionals will do, and if you're building your own comic book and you're doing it all yourself, like I did a lot of research on lettering. And I think Blambot is a good website. They had some free fonts. They had a lot of interesting and good tutorials. I'll link to them in the description as well. They just had good resources. They explained a lot, and they taught me a lot. You also, one of the things that I see that is kind of a rule of thumb, but will also be broken from time to time, is that this point should also point to, your tail should always kind of point to the center of your word balloon. So in a perfect world, I would have this a little bit more like that. So you see that this curve is curving into the center. I potentially could play around and move this around a little bit. I don't have a ton of space over here, and then I really start to cover ice pick. So I want to try not to do that if I can't make this any shorter. So I bend the rules just a tick, and then it still does curve closely to the center, not 100%. And I also want to make sure that it's going to his mouth. So now that we have it lined up, okay, and this is something that it seems like it's taking a lot of time, okay? And it did take me a lot of time to not only research all this, to look at what are the do's and don'ts, okay? But once you have it figured out, once you have a system in place, I would also, it really does become much, much, much quicker. I would take this direct selection tool and I'm just hitting space and making that a little bit wider because you want a nice taper. You want it to be nice and thin to get not super fat again, subject to opinion, but you want it to get a little bit fatter. So I have these two shapes here and now I need to merge them. It's this guy here. It's this little tool. Um, he's not showing what it is though. I don't remember. It's something merge shapes or something like that. And you can see when I hover over a shape, it kind of highlights that shape. It's actually like this weird kind of moire pattern or just a grid almost. And what this does is that if I have multiple shapes, I can come in here and just grab these three shapes and it merges it. Okay, I can use the Pathfinder to merge it as well. And that gives you your tail. I mean, like I said, it took a little while to get everything figured out and everything planned. Let's get into Clip Studio Paint. So this program is one-time purchase, pretty intuitive program. You can see I got a lot of menus, I got a lot of stuff set up, but it's what's so great about Clip Studio. And I'll make this, it's kind of actually more simple than Illustrator, and that's why I love it. So we have we hit T is the shortcut here, and that's going to get us to the balloon option. And with that balloon option, we can create a rounded balloon, an ellipse balloon, whatever kind of balloon we want, and we literally just draw a balloon. Boom, that's it. Okay, we have line color, fill color, you have the roundness, the brush size, which is the outline. Okay, and let's get this out of here. Let's get this over here so you can kind of compare. And you can see that that's making it bigger or smaller. I think I had it at 5. Yeah, so it's at 5. That's weird that they're all red. Anyways, so that line color can be, let's make it black. Boom. There we go. So now they're black. Very, very simple. So T brings up your balloon options here. Okay. And then what we can do is if we scroll down, we have what's called a balloon tail. Okay. And this is what makes Clip Studio so great. This is the options of how to bend the tail. So if we're doing this, we can make it straight. Okay, and the tail width, that's just going to make the tail bigger or smaller. I think I had it at 20, but let's just go to this so we can see it a little bit more. Okay, boom. That's how you're going to do that. Okay, this is a curved one. So there's a curved one. That's super big. Let's get back down to 20. And you know, if Luke is talking here, I can drag that. Boom. There it is. Now, that seems a little narrow, and that's fine. I can come in here. If I hit O, as you see, it's going to select the object. And then I can come in here and adjust these if I need to. And if I want, I can click multiple. Okay, hold down the shift key, and I can move this out. Okay, so there's your tail. Okay, again, I can select it, go back to T, go to your balloon tail. Maybe I need this to be 30. Okay, because I'm like, that's not quite as big as I want it to be. Boom, simple as that. Copy. Well, you know, like we said, we're going into our copy doc and we're going to copy something, right? Well, I click in this word balloon and paste my text, and that's it. Clip Studio will center the text to that word balloon. Okay, whatever size that word balloon is. Okay, let's go back to our object. And now I am selecting the tail, as you see, the tail and the word balloon all at once. And I'm able to size this if I made that word balloon too big. Okay, boom. Okay, so again, like it's so much easier than using, and if I hold down shift, it's gonna do what I was doing in Illustrator. It's gonna size it proportionately all around, all together at once. So I can create the white space around it that I need. If I want this bigger, I don't have to pick the necessarily the individual parameters. I can just go in here and do whatever I want and move it around. Okay. And this is all one piece now. Okay. So for me, like lettering in Clip Studio is far superior to Illustrator. Simply for the fact that if I hit T, you may have to hit it twice. Like I said, I use a lot of keyboard shortcuts, but you want to get to the subtool balloon. You have your balloon here. You have your different types of balloon. You come in here, you make a balloon, okay? And that, where'd it go? That brush size is 10, you know, maybe we want it to be 5 like the other ones. Oops, so I hit that. I come back to 5, okay? So when I'm selecting an object, it's showing me its parameters in here. If you don't have if you don't have the same menus, obviously, but you know, you may be missing some of the things that I'm showing you here. So this is going to be obviously object operation. This is your tool property, and this is just a kind of your subtool menu. There's a lot of things in Illustrator, or I'm sorry, a lot of things in Clip Studio that are just crazy, like absolutely crazy. There's a lot of windows that you can run through, and it's one of these things where you want to be able to have everything. So this is subtool operation I have pulled up. This is the tool property, which is what gives me that brush size, what gives me the properties of that balloon, okay? And your tool. Like those are some of the basic things where no matter what tool you're clicking on, those properties are going to show up. So I hit T, I hit it once again to get back to my rounded balloon. Now, I haven't dove too much into Clip Studio and like keyboard shortcuts and things of that nature. You may be able to have keyboard shortcuts for some of these. I would, if you can. I haven't done it, so if I, you know, had I done it or have it set up, I would absolutely show how to do it. I know you can do keyboard shortcuts, but again, I haven't really dove into the keyboard shortcut settings that much to where you can make shortcuts for this. But for right now, you make your balloon. You kind of place it using the object. Where does this balloon kind of live? I go back to, I click my balloon tail. Again, I have this tool properties panel open and it's on spline, and I set the width of the tail, and that's just the thickness, and I click once inside the word balloon, click again, and you can either hit enter or double click with the mouse. I like hitting enter. That seems a little small, so you know, maybe we go to 50. Maybe it's a larger word balloon, so I do that, you know, and boom, you have your word balloon. You come in, let's see, there's a little bit more text. Do that. I click in the word balloon, paste. Okay, sorry, I am grabbing the actual copy from the script, because what I want to do is show you how it comes in directly from my script. So I just opened up my script for Luke issue 1, page 1, panel 1 actually, but we're going to work on this. When I paste this in, you can see my little cursor is blinking. So there's an extra space, and that's just part of the script. I mean, it's just there. So I always delete. And then what I try to do is look for the middle, and I just start deleting and entering and deleting and entering until I get it to where I want everything to sit. Okay. And what I ended up doing is once you're done, you can hit the little check mark or shift enter, kind of closes up that word balloon. Okay. So I didn't do a lot of, like I said, making things bold. But what I ended up doing was, let's change this a little bit. and just hit enter, go to the end, and there, and then shift enter. Okay, so now talk about this font size here. I'm at 5.7, probably should go to 6. You know, it doesn't seem like that big of a difference, but that would be consistent with everything else. I'm still using that Crime Fighter BB font because I use that in all of my comics, and that pretty much gets us up to speed. That gets us where we are grabbing copy from our Pages document. We are, or Word doc, whatever you're using. I mean, you can, like I mentioned in the script video, you can use whatever you want to script out stuff. Okay, we are taking that word, all those words, copying the information, whatever it is, like what someone is saying, thought balloon, word balloon, whatever, pasting that into our word balloons. We are creating word balloons. We're creating thought balloons. What's really nice with Clip Studio, I still have my template. Okay, so I lock that layer, but that gives me the safe area of where all the copy should be. The really nice thing with Clip Studio Paint here, and then my art is in its own folder. Not that I was, but if I were to color this page, I have everything set up in one program. So very important to use the software that you're most comfortable with, but I had to kind of learn some of this. I would use it for inking years ago, and that's all I did. And then I'm like, oh, I can color in this, I can letter in this, I can do all these things in Clip Studio for a comic book. And people have been doing that for years. I just never taught myself how to do it. But what's really nice, all of this is one layer. All your copy is one layer. Okay. Yes, I can come in here and individually select a word balloon. I can individually select a tail, whatever I want. I can individually select those things. But when I am, you know, just generally speaking for the object, if I kind of pick another tool and come back into the object tool, it's all one layer. It does that automatically. If I were to like start from scratch, basically, let's just delete that layer. If I start with a word balloon, it creates its own layer. Okay. And if I paste into that word balloon, okay, that's how it's going to look from the beginning. So it took me a little while to get there, but take this, make it 6, go in there and play around, change your fonts, change everything, and there we have it. Hopefully this wasn't too much. I know it was long, but there was a lot to cover, a lot of techniques, a lot of tricks, a lot of tips, just a lot. Hopefully the Clip Studio side made sense. It's one of those things that I've been slowly migrating towards, like I said, using one-time programs, one-time paying programs, or programs that are considerably cheaper than what Adobe is charging. I started out in Illustrator. It's a lot to learn a new program, to understand that. But this one had a lot to go into, a lot to dive into. This wasn't a lot of technical things go into lettering. And it seems like it's a lot, but a lot of it is muscle memory. A lot of it is copy and paste. A lot of it is repeat. And then once you get the foundation of a page lettered, then it's just the nuances of word balloon placement, you know, making sure things look right, sound effects if you need them. Sound effects could really be a whole different video. I mean, you could go 20-30 minutes on just explaining how to build different sound effects. There's plenty of programs out there, plenty of tutorials and stuff out there about building sound effects. This is literally just me explaining how I lettered my first comic book. Everything that went into it, all the research I had to do to learn what was kind of more acceptable, what professionals do, what they don't do, and the tips and tricks along the way. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you on the next video, which will be the production and setting up all the files and getting them ready to send to the printer. So thanks for watching, and I will see you on the next video.